Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wahid podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. I've been following her on Instagram for quite a while now, and I'm actually really pumped to have her in with us today. And this is a topic that I really care about. So, yes, let's get started. We have Shefa Ubaid. She's a private counselor in Qatar, and she's here from Canada. She came to Qatar from Canada a while ago. So, let's get started. Shefa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here. Am I supposed to be looking
Awesome.
at the camera or looking at you?
Just look at me.
Okay. So I'm really excited to be here. I mean, it's always exciting to have a platform to talk about issues that I'm really passionate about. And one of them is psychology and raising awareness and getting to the people in the community. So for me, this is really exciting. So about me, I'm a psychology specialist. So I graduated from the University of Toronto. In psychology, and afterwards I didn't actually end up working in psychology while I was in Canada. We moved to Jordan, so it was a family decision to move back to Jordan. And so when I moved to Jordan, I found with the influx of refugees from the Syrian crisis, is that I was able to work at multiple NGOs, international NGOs, working with Syrian refugees in the camps and also in the local cities. So to me, this was quite exciting to be able to apply the information that I learned directly with people that I feel like were quite marginalized and needed the help. And at the same time, it was a huge learning experience, and we'll talk about it as the podcast goes on. But so after that experience, I've been a year here in Doha. I worked at a school, and now I made the decision to work to start a new initiative, to work in the community, to work as a counselor, as a trainer, and as a consultant.
Okay, awesome. So this is great to just get to know everything you've done. But tell us why you moved to Qatar specifically.
Well, why I moved to Qatar? Kind of like all women do here. I mean, we move with our husbands, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
so my husband works at Hamad here, so I've been here for a year, and so it was a family decision to move together, and we've been quite happy here. It was kind of a surprise because because I used to live in the Gulf when I was a kid, and so Gulf, like 15 years ago was quite different than what it is now. So it's been pretty nice here, and it already feels like home.
Oh yeah, and I think it's a really good place to start a family as well.
Yeah. I noticed that. I didn't expect it to be so family, friendly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So, what got you interested in counseling?
Well, it's actually a couple of things. I started university with the idea that I want to be a pharmacist. Because the whole idea of a pharmacist is it's something that, pleases my parents because it's science.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, right?
Oh my God.
Right. So
I'm a Desi Indian kid, so I totally get
exactly.
that.
I mean, we're all, same thing, like our parents, Desi, same thing. I mean, same mentality.
Yeah, either engineering or medical.
Yeah, exactly. So I assumed that it would be something in the middle that wouldn't be as hard as being a doctor, and I knew that I couldn't even do that. That wasn't even in my repertoire, It wasn't even in my ideas. And I went into school thinking that that's what I wanted to do. And then after first year, I had one class. I decided to take an elective in psychology. So I thought that, it's like one of those easy courses. Apparently it wasn't that easy, but it changed my whole outlook because we had a professor that had 3 degrees. So he was a doctor. At the same time, he was a lawyer, and he was also so doctor, lawyer, and a psychologist. So what was interesting about his job is he was able to merge all 3 and work in supporting forensic cases with when people say that they're mentally ill, and he's able to prove whether or not that's actually a case.
Oh my God.
So I find it so interesting how it really is a science, and people think of psychology as this whole philosophical thing, but it's not. Everything in psychology is based on real studies. And everything is based on, it's human behavior, but we prove it through studies. So it's different than, philosophy or even social work in a sense. So I find that so interesting. It's it is a science. And at the same time, I found that this is kind of totally not even expected, is I was spending so much of my time outside of school volunteering and, doing things for the community and meeting people and putting on events. And I found that I was doing that, and it was fun for me, and at the same time, even though it was super tiring, I didn't find it hard work. So I realized that I wanted to do a career that involved serving others. So that's when I decided I'm going to shift my whole perspective. Who cares about being a pharmacist? Like, whatever, like, counters and drugs. Sorry about all pharmacists that are listening. But, like,
Who cares about
yeah,
you?
I'm just saying, like, for me, like, I really, like, saw this professor as someone who I could, look up to, and someone that is an example of how you can use the degree, because people think that you can't use the degree. A lot of time they think that's not like, being a doctor or things like that. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
That's a very interesting story, actually, because it's like you meet somebody and then they just change your outlook on life, and that's something very similar to what I experienced in university. I did journalism, and the whole time, like, for me, I wanted to learn psychology on the side because I know that it's very like, people think when you're a journalist you don't really, like, it doesn't matter, but when you're interviewing people, to get to know them and to truly understand where they're coming from, I think it's very important to have some knowledge about, how to speak to them, how to listen. So I really admire psychology. And so I wanted to actually get a little bit more into the topic, especially I feel like not just this region, but everywhere there's a lot of misconception and judgment towards psychology and the science as well, but also, people who are suffering and struggling. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about it, because personally I have like you're saying, yes, psychology is a science, and I've heard that so many times, but then why is it that there is so much misconception about it, and why isn't it considered as important as physical health? So yeah.
I think that partly has to do with, well, I put the blame on Freud for doing this. I mean, but a lot of the past knowledge and, like, literature out there about psychology was basically this idea of, Freud coming up with theories that people found really weird, theories around, how a child gets attached to the mother, and all these things related to, like, provocative things that people didn't want to talk about during the time. And so that kind of gave the impression that, psychology was this thing that was, like, based on theories. But this was, like, a long time ago. And now psychology is all based on experimentation and based on studies and real results. And I think, although there's lots of misconceptions, I do think that now, because there's a rise in psychological disorders and distress in general in almost everyone. I mean, if you think about it, anxiety in particular, anxiety and distress is kind of the basis of any disorder. But in every family, we have someone who is struggling with anxiety, for example. And so it's become, people have, thought about psychology differently, not because they were aware or they were educated. It's because of a real need that came about. So I can tell you a story of when I was at the camp, the refugee camp in Jordan. People initially, there was the whole idea of, having a support circle and sitting with a psychologist was, like, totally absurd. Like, what are we going to do? Sit with a psychologist, waste our time? Like, even though they're wasting their time anyway in the camps, like,
yeah.
So the idea was absurd at the beginning, but when time passed and they were becoming more distressed, and it was becoming more difficult to cope, people were finding that they were getting a lot of relief from these circles. Well, I'll tell you about the circles later, but from these support groups and from a psychologist. So then it became, saying that you're a psychologist, before we used to avoid saying that we're a psychologist, we'd say that we were, like, counselors or social workers in the camp, because we didn't want people to think that everybody who talked to us had some sort of disorder or was,
Yeah, because there's some stigma
there's always stigma, right?
It.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what happened, because of a need came about, that when you said that you were a psychologist, it became something that attracted people. And so I think there's a lot of changing definitions around it. I mean, and, the whole idea of getting psychological support, I mean, people are now more open to it, and they're more interested. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting for us. It makes our job easier. It makes it easier to reach people. It makes it easier to educate people, and give them psychoeducation.
Yeah. So as a psychologist in Qatar, what kind of trend have you generally observed? A lot of the times when, like, for example, when I was in university, like, my first year was really difficult for me, and I was really depressed. And a lot of the times the kind of advice I got was, you're in such a great university, you know, you need to be more grateful and you
Yeah.
need to pray, and
Yeah.
and that is basically it. Like, if I just prayed some more,
Yeah.
then all my issues would go
Yeah.
away. So, you know, like, that is kind of the general, like, around me, and it's basically because I have like 20 something friends, and most of them they feel sort of that it's not very easy for them to open up and talk about their issues. And generally, a lot of them also get to hear the same thing, like, you know, just go pray or whatever, unless they have it in themselves to go to a counselor and talk to a counselor, and then, you know, but otherwise it's mostly it's just that kind of attitude. So have you observed something similar, or?
So yeah, I have, but I can't say that I've done it in Qatar yet. So
Okay.
because I told you I was working at a school.
Yeah, yeah.
But so the whole culture of university, because it's super competitive and there's always a high load, and that load, you know, that the studies and all of the, you know, the staying up at night and things like that, it becomes a culture in the university to the point where some people actually have depression or have anxiety or have these things that are could be diagnosable or could be very distressing, could be real issues, but because of the, you know, the culture of, yeah, push yourself, yeah, we're all going through
we're
the
all in
same
the same
thing.
thing, yeah.
Exactly. So then it becomes this person doesn't get support because they think, oh, I can just suck it up. But
Yeah.
it's not as easy as saying suck it up, because really what happens is, especially when you have anxiety or you have these issues, is that they are real and they're manifested. Even your body starts to show signs. So some
Yeah.
of the signs could be lack of sleep or oversleeping or overeating or lack of eating, or, you know, showing distress in social situations. So these all of these signs, and even if you do, like, there's also like physical tests that you can do at a doctor to find out that, you know, if you have, you know, high cortisol levels, or that you are struggling with, you know, your body is struggling to, you know, cope with what's happening. So the culture of university, what it does is it kind of masks these issues. So what happens is, after university, we have this, what happens to graduates after universities, they get all depressed and they lose hope and they feel like they can't find a job, and partly because it's like it's so competitive.
The work culture, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of people do get into that because they haven't really addressed the issues while they were studying, because it was masked, it was distracted. It wasn't really, like, the underlying issues weren't really resolved. And so this is what happens after university.
Yeah.
So what I found, some of the programs that, while I was in university, that I initiated, was a support group for women. And so this was quite a simple concept. It would be once a week that women could take on leadership of hosting a circle, talking about issues that they faced every day. And while I was in Canada, we had, on top of the issues of studying and things like that, we had times when racism and discrimination was
Oh, for sure.
was
Yeah,
also a
yeah.
stressor
Yeah.
for minority women. So
Yeah.
this was a chance for these women to express themselves in a safe space. And although it's such a simple concept, it brought in so many people, and so many people were happy to get that support.
Yeah, yeah.
At the same time, during that same year, a Muslim chaplaincy started. So a Muslim chaplaincy is basically this idea that you can get a counselor, but at the same time a counselor with like a religious background. And so that it exists in other religions as well. But this person was a, you know, full-time staff in the university. So I actually utilized this person. And I thank them very much, because, you know, during a really tough time, they were there for me. And so that's not always available.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The whole concept of a counselor being available on site, you know, at university
Yeah.
is totally, you know, necessary.
Yeah. And well, even outside university, like, for example, a lot of the problems that I've noticed here are that even if there are so many psychologists around Qatar, like, it's so difficult to actually, first of all, really expensive, number one, and that's an issue that I've heard a lot. And, you know, if they have to go regularly, then it becomes a monetary toll on the person who wants to go. And secondly, like, there are long lines, and just there's so much paperwork and stuff to get through if you want to get referrals and stuff like that. So, you know, it just really demotivates the
Yeah.
person from even going through that process and
Yeah.
even getting the help they need. So are there other issues, or how do you think Qatar in general is coping with this?
So I think that I believe quite a bit. Although there's always demand for psychologists. I
Yeah.
mean, everywhere you go, and there's always lineups, and it's always super expensive, especially the assessments. And sometimes it's overpriced. It's like you do this big long assessment, or sometimes it's even a piece of paper, and you pay this amount, and then you have to follow up with the sessions, right?
Yeah.
So for that reason, I do support like big time community supports. So community supports is basically this idea that through circles, through getting involved in a community, through being social, through being active, through psychoeducation, mental health awareness, people can get a grip of what's happening in their lives and they can self-help. So, this is, a huge deal for people who feel that a psychologist is not really something that they will need to that extent. It really depends on how much distress that they're feeling, right? So oftentimes, we're feeling distressed from a particular event, and we need to vent, we need to talk about it, right? We probably just need an avenue. We need a supportive person who can give us a safe space, right? And that's not always easy to find. Sometimes even our own, people who are around us and our own family members can't give us that space. So this is why community support is important. So I would say look for any sort of social circle around you that can do that. And, like for myself, what my new initiative in Doha is to put on these trainings and workshops, things like that, for people from the community to come and to be psychoeducated. So the idea of psychoeducation is you give them, for example, an overview of what is depression or what is anxiety or where is distress. But you also give them the tools to be able to cope and to be able to handle these issues, right? So while I was at the camp, I wrote a manual and I initiated and facilitated this concept of connection circles. So we had issues with stigma there as well, and super high demand. You're talking about a camp of over 2,000 people.
Yeah,
How are
yeah.
they all going to get support?
Yeah.
Especially if it's one-on-one psychological support, which was available, but again, high waiting list. So what I did is I decided to start something called connection circles. And the idea of connection circles is for you put men together and women together, or youth together, or children together, depending on age groups. But the idea is they go through this program where at first it's about psychoeducation. So, and it uses a lot of visuals. So what happens to our body when we're distressed? How do you feel? What are you thinking? What is your body doing? How do you react? What kind of behaviors do you usually use to cope, right? And so we take that knowledge and we use existing support systems. So everybody has something inside of them that's kept them going. It's kept them handling hard times, right? And so what I tried to do was what are the things that makes them strong and makes them resilient. So it could be, reading, it could be socializing, it could be meditating, it could be walking, it could be praying, really depends on everyone's social background.
Yeah.
And so everyone came out with a customized, kind of emergency 1, 2, 3, what I will do if I'm feeling distressed based on what was successful for me in the past. And at the same time, I taught them new techniques. So breathing techniques, meditation techniques, free writing techniques, free drawing techniques, art therapies, was so successful, especially with the youth. I mean, the male youth, because such a difficult, group to be able to get something out of them, then it's difficult for them to speak about their issues. So these kind of, tools were used, and these circles were extremely, they were so rewarding. At the same time, there were kids there were school dropouts that went back to school. There were parents that were, signing up for it for themselves because they were getting so excited of all the good, positive results that their children were seeing.
Oh, wow.
And so, and at the same time, the whole community was involved. So we had these 2 cabins and we didn't have lots of material, but everybody was involved in, painting the walls and getting the plants and getting the books. And we ended up fundraising for a library from all over the world that is actually still there. So those kind of that because everybody was involved, this whole community involvement and this community closeness was almost as equivalent in results as sitting with a psychologist, right? But you're giving them the tools to, with a psychologist, sometimes people can be reliant on a psychologist to support them, and they will become attached to the psychologist sometimes. And so what happens is with this kind of support is you help them help themselves and help each other.
Yeah, well, so if they don't have these resources in the future, then they're able to still help themselves. That sounds very interesting. Yeah. So one of the things that I did was as a journalist was I went to Malaysia and I met refugee children over there, basically to report on their lives over there. And Malaysia has hundreds of thousands of refugees living there. So, and one of the things that I noticed was that these children were unwilling to talk about how upsetting their experiences were. Yeah. So they would brush past them, like they would be like, "Oh yeah, I heard bombs, but whatever, it's or they would just focus on their current lives and just try to be grateful about what they had, and they were not very willing to, and it was very interesting to me because I thought that there's a person who's willing to listen, so I thought they would open up eventually, but they just wanted to talk about the good things and not talk about things that affected them. Yeah. And so I mean, I just wanted to ask you, what was your experience like? Like, truly, how did you feel? Did it take a toll on you? Because personally, I used to go back home every night and be like, I'm so ungrateful about my... It
almost takes a toll on us more than it does on them.
Yes. So I would be calling my mom up and crying and be like, they're so grateful about things, and I'm worried about losing my shoes or things like that. So I just wanted to ask your experience. How did it feel to do this, and would you recommend it to somebody else, and how does something like this benefit you?
So I just want to talk about your first point, because what you're saying resonated with me quite a bit, because when you're an outsider and that you're seeing everything from the outside, you're seeing a closed off fence in the middle of the desert, for example, with camps, and you're seeing these children that look like they need basic needs. You want to jump in and help and be like, how can I help? Talk to me, things like that. But actually the truth of the matter is that, especially children are extremely resilient, and most people, even after very traumatic, stressful war situations, don't actually, go through post-traumatic stress disorder or have any disorder. Majority of people. So they are resilient. They're truly resilient. At the same time, there is part of PTSD or trauma manifests itself in avoidance behavior. So it's natural to want to avoid talking about something that has caused you lots of trauma. And so one way to do it with children, and this is why we do it through, the connection circles was the idea to do it, rather than being like, hey, come talk to me about your issues. It was more like, a socializing kind of event. So the idea of it is that you get children to, not directly talk about their issues, but you can do it through art. So, you can do it through art, you can do it through drama. So they're able to work through the difficult things that they've been through, while at the same time not directly facing it and being re-traumatized, because we always have that risk. So I can totally resonate with me how you felt, because the truth is we do want to rescue people. We have this tendency to want to rescue people, but we need to know that, we need to take a step back and, evaluate, how resilient they are and how far they've come, and look at what their existing strengths are and build those, right? Look at what helps them cope on a daily basis and build that, and go into their world, right? Rather than me trying to impose my world and my worldview on them, right? And so if I do recommend this, definitely recommend for everyone to, find, there's always people that it's always really attractive to talk about refugees, because people kind of want to be the savior, Angelina Jolie kind of thing. It's really attractive. But we all know someone who's in need of help.
Yeah.
We all know, specific group of people who are marginalized or that are minorities and that require that support. So, it doesn't have to mean flying and
Into
doing this
another-
mission,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But it could
yeah.
mean that. I mean, it really depends, right? But so long as you're coming in from the perspective of someone who is respecting these people's cultural backgrounds and how far they've come, and that understands that they are super strong, and they're even stronger than us. You said that you were crying. Like, I had the same experience during my first session because they were talking about dead bodies and having to rescue people out of the rubble and people that were, their families that were passed
Yeah.
away and things like that in such a way that was so casual that really threw me off. I started thinking about myself, like, how privileged am I? Like, my whole life I've been in Canada. I haven't been doing anything to these people, and look how far they are. And
Yeah.
you see,
and
so
how generous they are. Oh my God.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly,
just-
and their
it's just-
generosity,
yeah,
and
oh my God.
like that's something that will, but at the same time, for them, it's enough that you are in solidarity with them, that you haven't forgotten their cause, because that's what happens is that we want to help out with ways that are quite like a kind of forward, but sometimes just being around them, showing them
Yeah.
that they're an ally.
Yeah.
Because I was I'm originally Palestinian, but I'm also
Yeah.
Jordanian,
Yeah, yeah.
also Canadian, and that I was there for them every
Yeah.
day, and that I cared about the cause.
Yeah.
That is enough for them to feel that they are cared for, and that
Yeah.
it's enough that if you could do that, you've done enough.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I've noticed just acknowledging their story.
Exactly.
Just acknowledging that they have a story to tell
Yeah.
was very important. And like, to be honest, I don't, it's just a real, because when I was there and I was like missing my family a little bit, and I was just
Yeah.
away from my family for
Yeah.
like a short while, and they felt so bad for me, and they were like,
Yeah.
oh my God,
Oh, yeah.
I'm so sorry for you, like you're my sister, brother,
Yeah.
just like, and for me it was like, wow, what?
Yeah.
But then I realized that people who struggle with much worse in their lives are very emotionally, I don't know, they have very high emotional IQs for other people. So yeah, I don't know why I brought this up.
No, it's
But-
true. You're right. I mean, I had moments when I broke down and they were helping me. Like, it just happens, and you have to accept
Yeah.
it. Like, this is what it's important not to have that power difference or that privilege. You need to know where you're coming
Yeah,
from.
we're all, yeah.
And you need to, it could have been me or you.
Yeah.
It really could have been.
Yeah, true,
you know?
very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about. Oh, I forgot my point. This is a very like interesting topic,
Yeah.
and you just start getting so much into it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you were talking about you were talking about how we can find a cause anywhere, and this thing that I've found issue with is when I came back to Qatar, and then for the longest time I was like, I really need to go. More than them wanting this, it's more of an inner desire, because it makes you feel like you're doing something,
Yeah.
and it gives you like some sort of avenue, because we're all going through some things in life, and you want to release. And for me personally, like the best way is community engagement as well for me. And so I came back, and that was so important, but I couldn't find many avenues here that were as strong as as being able to go somewhere and help. And so I wanted to ask you, like, how have you been? I'm sure you also feel that sort of thing. So how have you been dealing with that? Like, how can we engage ourselves as a community in Qatar? How can we find issues in Qatar? And have you found some places where you've been able to to practice what you care about in this region, in Qatar, where almost everybody around us is as privileged as we are?
So there were a couple of people who were doing initiatives during Ramadan with giving back to workers that are on the field, on the engineering sites and things like that, and people who are less privileged. So there are people that do need your support. I think I resonate with you to the point of what you're saying is, how do we find that source of support for us, or how do we find that community for us? So here, I think it was also a challenge for me. I mean, at the beginning, you do assume that kind of everyone's in their own life here, and that things are kind of isolated and things like that. But when you get past this, you realize that once I worked at a school, for example, I started getting in touch with parents and their children and seeing kind of, it was just enough for me to kind of see children every day and see this sort of like people that are alive every day, and that there's a community out there, and being part of the community of a school was helpful for me. And through that, I think, especially if you come from places where you've had a lot of friends and you've had a lot of, you had that social network, and then you start from scratch when you come here. Just with here in Qatar, because people are so diverse, you have to be open to the idea of meeting people anywhere, no matter how, And so this is also what happens to people when they get married, is that suddenly like they want to go back to their friends, and their friends are all over the place, and they find themselves alone, right? So the idea is, from now on, getting a social connection and making friends is actually has to be an effort from you. It takes effort from you. So you have to put in the effort to find places that match you and match your values and match what there are. Like when I started having that mentality that I can find that social, support. I can find people who are like-minded. I started meeting people and connecting, and they started feeling more at home and more,
So you were just like proactive about it.
You have to be proactive about it, and it's for your own mental health, for your own social health. Like, I'm married, and people assume that when you're married, you don't need, that's it, you and your husband. No, but like you need your own supports. You need something that's for you, right? And you have to seek it out proactively. Yeah, look at what exists. Things do exist, and we can lead people, like us we can lead people to those places. And
there are things like, I think, beach cleanups and just rota, I think, but I feel like we can, like I keep telling my friends, we should start an initiative, like if we can't find it, let's do it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but inshallah I'll start something, and then I'll
it
interview
doesn't even
myself
have to be something like a company or a business or any of that stuff. It doesn't really have to be anything. Like I'm doing an initiative, and it's part of what I want to do in order to bring my learnings to Doha, right? So just having that mindset and seeking opportunity out there, seeking things for you, will open things up for you. So it doesn't have to be all fancy,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. But for some reason, we have this in the back of our mind that, I don't know, we have to go to a country where people are in need, and then that's the only place we can help.
Exactly,
and you need, so it's, and if you experience that so often, and then you come back and you're like, there's nothing here. But no, maybe we should make something.
There's lots of, there's elderly that people can visit. There's young children in schools. There's, children or people with disabilities. There's lots of places where you can volunteer, and also government institutions here that do have, these kind of, they do provide services and that you can volunteer with.
Yeah.
It really does take being proactive. So you have to really seek out, what is it that I want to do? What exists? And, working around that.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I know this is such a big topic, and we can keep going on about this forever, but like briefly, how can we become better at helping others, or just, I don't know, how can we be more emotionally available for other people to be able to talk to us? Because like you said, we're not gonna always be able to find a counselor or a psychologist to talk to. So as a community, what can we do? And like small things that everybody can do. We don't have to be a psychologist to be able to do it. We can just be humans and do it.
So to help others or to help ourselves?
Ourselves and others, and just like, I don't know what I'm saying.
So, no, what you're saying is a really valid point. I mean, first of all, we need to help ourselves, because you can't help someone if your cup is empty. You can't give them anything. You really can't. If you don't help yourself, and that you're not in a good place in your life, or that you feel that there's places in your life that are causing you distress, they will somehow, you try to help someone, and then you'll get angry at them, and you're like, why did I lash out at them? And exactly, because you still have issues that you need to resolve within yourself. So I feel that, if people can't get to a psychologist, and that's always we try to encourage people to go to a professional, and if they can't, I always say take care of your basic needs first before you assume that you have an issue. Why? Because like, the whole issue of university students, for example. I mean, when they go without food and they go without sleep and they go without, relaxing, and they're constantly distressed, they don't give themselves their basic needs, right? And so when you don't get your basic needs, then your body goes into stress mode. So what I tell people first is that look at what your lifestyle is like on an everyday basis. What kind of foods do you eat? Do you sleep enough? Are you resting enough? Are you relaxing enough? Are you doing a hobby for yourself? Are you exercising? Those kind of things. If you've done those things and you find yourself you're still distressed, then there's where psychoeducation comes to play. And that can be in the form of, joining groups or trainings or workshops that give me the skills to be able to see if I'm really if I'm going through depression or anxiety or any of the common, issues that people face. Or it could be up for reading. You can read. It doesn't really take a professional. You can help yourself by, reading and getting psychoeducation.
Yeah, and
so,
we have all of those resources very easily available now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are available, and talk to someone always, that helps. Although not everyone is in the same. Not everyone is the same. Like, some people are introverted, so they prefer to be alone to be able to recharge. So it's not the same for everyone.
Definitely. Okay, no, those are really good. That's really good advice, especially about the basic needs thing. That's something I've never thought about. Like, we just immediately think, oh no, I'm going through something and I don't know what to do about it, and you just like overthink and just make it worse for yourself. Yeah. Okay, so. And then there's the case about like helping someone else, and a lot of times I've seen, and I've experienced it myself, is when I see somebody who's really depressed and they're not helping themselves, and you try your best to listen and listen and listen and listen, but eventually it starts getting to you as well, and then you're like, oh my god, I need to distance myself because this is driving me crazy now. Yeah. And you so what do you do in those situations?
So basically this is when I
and I'm sure that's like for psychologists that's like an everyday thing or something.
Well, yes, but we have tools to be able to overcome this, right? So when I worked later with an American NGO, Syrian refugees and Jordanian, locals that are going through what we call gender-based violence or, like sexual assault, abuse, etc. So one of the themes that you face is this kind of someone sitting with a counselor and just re-traumatizing themselves and just not getting anywhere in the sessions. And they're always, in the victim mode, and they're always, so this is quite common. And what you need to know as a person who's listening to someone like this is that this is actually a very basic reaction we call learned helplessness. And so there's this really interesting experiment where they had, I think it was a dog or a monkey, one of the animals. I'm trying to remember. So they had this, I think it was a dog, that was in this cage, right? And so this cage there's two parts to this cage, and then there's like a door in the middle of this cage. Or like, a door or a hub in the middle. So the first part of the experiment was the dog was being shocked for no reason. Electric shock. I know, it's unethical. I know, it's one of those unethical experiments that ended up being like, it wasn't never replicated for that reason. So the dog being shocked, the dog being shocked constantly, right? On the other side, there's nothing. The dog will not be shocked. They will be free. So the dog being shocked constantly with the combination of they can't escape. The door is closed. The dog can't escape. Keeps trying to escape. Can't escape. Keeps trying to escape. Can't escape. Right? When the door was opened and the dog was shocked, what would you assume that would happen?
The dog would probably go back.
You get out of the situation?
Yeah. Sorry, no.
The dog... So, okay. So the dog is being shocked and can't leave. Can't leave, okay?
Okay.
Constantly. Then the door opens. The dog is shocked. What happens? Just you can guess.
Like, is this a school exam?
No, it's not. There's only two options.
The dog.
There's
oh
only
my
two
god!
options.
I don't know. Sorry.
Either he stays in the. No, it's not that. There's only two options. Either the dog stays.
Okay.
Or the dog leaves. What do you think happens?
When the door is finally open.
Yes.
The dog tries to leave.
No, the dog doesn't try to leave. Why?
Because it's accepted its situation. I don't know.
No, it's not really accepted. It's still it's super distressed.
Yeah.
But the dog has been conditioned, so now there's the concept
okay.
of learned helplessness. So we've learned to be helpless through this way. So
Okay.
so what happens is with this
I'm
happens a
glad
lot.
you answered the question because now I'm like,
This happens a lot with women who are in abused relationships. Is that although you give them all of the tools,
oh yeah, that's very true.
right,
Yeah,
and they can
yeah.
be capable, and they can have power within themselves, and they can even be like power. Can be they can be economically, strong to the point where they don't have to be in this relationship. They could have all of the avenues available to them to escape the relationship or to find a solution, but you find them replaying the whole scenario over and over again, not being able to leave. So you as someone who wants to help, you are well-intentioned, but when you don't know this fact, now that it even changes the way their brain works. So what we found with women who are abused and women who were raped in particular, that there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for emotional processing. Mm-hmm. And there's a part called the cortex, that's the front, that's responsible for reasoning. So what happens to those two parts is the amygdala, the part that's responsible for emotional processing, actually gets enlarged in an MRI. It's enlarged, and what is diminished is your cortex is smaller than someone who's healthy and who's didn't go through rape or abuse on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So this shows you that this is actually a physical change, not a psychological change.
Yeah. And like the major misconception about things are like when you're going through something mentally, there is no physical change. And so, like, it's just a mental thing, and you can,
Yeah,
so
even
I'm really
your
glad you
hormones,
brought this up.
Yeah, even this is part of the misconceptions about psychology and about, psychological disorders and distress in general. And so,
physically, if it changes your brain, then
if it changes your cortex, which is responsible for reasoning, how are you supposed to, it's going to be even more difficult for you to find solutions to your problems.
I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah. So, what we do with these cases, what do we do with them, right? We have to, first of all, know this fact. So when we know this fact, we're able to be more empathetic and more patient. Mm-hmm. That's one. But what we do is we give them the awareness. So we give them the awareness. We teach them about, for example, the cycle of violence. This is part of the psychoeducation. So you teach them if they're going through anxiety, depression, etc. You tell them what is typically seen in these kind of cases. Mm-hmm. So the cycle of violence, the woman always assumes, for example, that when there's always this time when the perpetrator would apologize and they would shift, and then they'd feel like, oh, everything's better, and I just need to be a better wife or a better partner or whatever. But it happens again, right? So you show them that this is a cycle that is reoccurring, and that it's not your fault. So you need to take the blame off of them. That this is something that you give them the psychoeducation. You tell them about these kind of cases. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of patience, a lot of persistence, you have to find ways for them to find catharsis. And catharsis is when you find emotional release by talking about your issues or being able to, let them out. We use the word vent, commonly. So when they are able to do that, and it takes a lot of sessions, and you give them the awareness, at the same time you give them the tools. So you give them the tools, for example, you give them emergency numbers. We do that. We put together a safety plan with them. If you are under, a violent situation, what do you have ready for you to escape if it happens? And so that could be a phone. We had one case where she had to bury her phone that we had given her in the sand, so that her husband doesn't find it, because perpetrators are often very, very manipulative, and they could be smart. It's not that, so they could know if you have a phone on you or if you have something else. So we gave her that tool, and then you gave her the emergency numbers, and at the same time you help her prepare a sort of escape bag in case that she needs to escape. She'll have cash, or she'll have clothes, and she'll know what to do during those times. You give them those tools. You give them the services. So you refer them to services like psychosocial support services, support groups. Sometimes some women, when they find themselves, when they have cash or they have money, that they're able to have power and they're able to escape better. Because oftentimes women say, oh, well, if I leave this relationship, then what do I do? what do I do after, right? So economic support and development was part of the project that I was working on. Is we refer them to cash assistance. So this gives them the support that if they thought of just escaping, or that they had an avenue. And at the same time empowering them through teaching them how to sew, teaching them how to cook and sell, teaching them how to do hair and makeup, and then also like make money and make their own businesses, small businesses.
Yeah.
So give them the tools. So psychoeducate them. Firstly, be aware of their situation, be empathetic, understand that what they're going through is very, very difficult. And that disclosure in itself is super hard.
Yeah.
And then you give them the psychoeducation. Then you give them the tools, right? And then what naturally happens is they find a solution they find a solution. You know, if they don't, you either have to be more patient, or that you would have to understand that it's not always a solution for them to escape their relationship. That's not always the case. It always goes down back to what the survivor wants. So if the survivor wants to stay in their relationship, you must respect that regardless of your personal views, right? So it really depends on the case, and you know, it takes a lot of patience with these kind of people that are facing the denial, that they're facing these issues.
And is this the case for like people who are not? I mean, it's not even always about relationships, right? They might just be really severely depressed or really struggling.
Yeah.
So is this the same case?
It's the same idea of like when you find someone in this learned helplessness mode, what you can do to get them out. Right? It's not just about, you know, suck it up. You know, people love to say that. You know, suck it up. You know, pray, or you know, go to a sheikh, which is quite common actually here in Qatar, and common in Arabic and Middle Eastern countries, is that they assume that when you know, read Quran and read these scriptures, that suddenly they're supposed to feel better. And for some people, it does work. It's not that it doesn't work, you know, it does work. But what if they're facing a real physical, psychological issue, they would need extra support, and they would have to look in a different way.
Okay. Wow. Oh my God, I've learned so much. And like, thank you so much for talking to us about all of this. So I just want to ask you now, you know, our audience, they must really be inspired after hearing you. They might want to reach out to you. They might want to consult with you for their, you know, personally as well. So how can they do that?
So first of all, it's important for me to say that I speak both languages. So I know we're doing this in English, but part of, you know, my personal values and my mission is to also reach out to people who are marginalized and don't have that support. So if someone can only speak Arabic, I can talk to them only in Arabic. So that's important. So now I started this new initiative called Noor Counseling. And so it's basically me, but as a counselor and as a trainer, and as a consultant. So with the counseling part, it could be, you know, someone needing a one-on-one session, you know, or a mother needing help with her child, a 2-on-1 session, or it could be through a whole program. So it could be like 6 sessions, someone needing extra support. So that really depends on the initial assessment and initial call. So that part is the counseling. And then the training and the workshops is being out there in the community, being more aware. My focus is women and families. It's just my niche. It's the people that I, you know, feel strongest about and that I have the most experience to work with. So there will be workshops coming up that I want people to kind of...
Well, how will people find out?
So they can find out 2 ways. There's a website happening, but hopefully next week. So there's an Instagram account called @NoorCounsel, and a counsel with 1 L. And there's a Facebook page @Noor Counseling. So those are 2 ways in which they can find out what's happening and that they can be involved, and they can contact me through that way. Until I set up the website, then they can also contact me through the website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been really a pleasure, and you know, this is a really important part of getting to the community, and I'm really excited
definitely.
about it.
And I really hope that, like, you know, I'm really looking forward to your workshops and all your initiatives. I think they're something we really need in the community. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
And yes, guys, thank you for listening. And if you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, or if you want us to get her back on the show and ask her about some other things, let us know. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.